Hello, class. My name is Amanda Wilcox, and I set out to study women in leadership and mostly female CEOs and why we have so few of them. So, to start, it's important to understand that while women have made great strides in the workforce, there is still a problem with women not rising to the ranks that men have in corporate America and also in politics. According to the 2015 Catalyst census, women hold only one out of every five corporate board seats in the US. Even fewer women get to lead organizations, as less than 4% of CEOs in the US are female. And this problem extends to other countries as well. For instance, in Australia, less than 5% of major corporations are led by female CEOs, and over a third have no senior female leaders at all. These figures exist despite there being no research to support the idea that men are better leaders than women. The lack of gender diversity in leadership actually has a strong tie to culture. For instance, in countries that favor masculine cultures, they place an emphasis on leadership that is direct, confrontational, competitive, and autonomous, while in feminine cultures, they prefer indirect, conciliatory, facilitative, and collaborative leadership styles. So, some of the masculine countries include Japan, Italy, and the United States. These cultures emphasize the need for men to be the breadwinners of the family. Therefore, relatively few women occupy high paying executive positions. And feminine countries include countries like Norway, Sweden, and the Netherlands. These countries find it normal for both men and women to pursue high paying careers. Both genders receive support for prioritizing their families over their careers, and women are not expected to conform to masculine leadership styles in order to succeed. On that note, countries with masculine cultures also place great values on specific types of leaders. That means a directive leader. So directive leaders typically use questions to direct agreement. They do not link their comments to the previous speaker's statement. They make abrupt topic shifts, use minimal active listening techniques, and tend to interrupt other speakers. This is versus the cooperative or feminine leader who uses questions to solicit information and participation, acknowledges the position of previous speakers, avoids topic shifts, uses active listening techniques, and uses cooperative overlaps to show support of others' ideas. Another explanation for why women face such hurdles to rise to leadership positions is gender bias and also confirmation bias. So confirmation bias can be explained as people favoring choices that align with their preconceived perspective for something. So for instance, 97% of Australians in a survey asked to describe a CEO described a white, middle-aged male. In terms of gender bias, one study actually showed that the more a female CEO's appointment is publicized, the more the company's share prices may suffer, at least for a short while. And this phenomenon only happens when the female CEO appointment is heavily publicized. So in other words, if the female quietly assumes the position, share prices actually tend to go up. Another example is a study that was conducted by Walker and Eretz of 22 mixed gender business school students. So the students were asked to solve a fictitious problem of being stranded on an island. They were supposed to determine as a group which supplies were most necessary for survival. After studying the interactions between the groups, researchers identified women as the leaders in the majority of the groups. However, not one group unanimously identified a woman as their leader. This is despite many of the women leaders exhibiting traditionally masculine leadership traits. This means that even though the women were exhibiting the leadership traits that masculine cultures value, because they were women, other members of the group did not see them as leaders. Another issue facing female CEO appointments is current hiring practices. So most CEO search firms are pulling from existing executives when they look for a CEO. This means that they're dealing with an average ratio of 9 males to every 1 female. To top it off, hiring boards are typically made up of other executives at the organization, which we know most organizations' executives are male. Despite many of the hurdles that women face when trying to climb to the top, many have shattered the glass ceiling, only to then be confronted by something even more precarious, the glass cliff. So the glass cliff phenomenon shows that historically, women are only appointed to positions of leadership when a company or an organization is already underperforming. Some examples of this include Carly Fiorina, the former HP CEO who was appointed in a last-ditch effort to revitalize an aging and underperforming organization. Marissa Mayer, who was named CEO of Yahoo after at least 12 years of decline in profits. And then Mary Barra, who was appointed CEO of GM after the company had to answer for faulty ignition switches and recall 30 million vehicles. And most recently, there's Theresa May, who's being appointed Prime Minister of Britain after the country voted to leave the European Union, basically plunging themselves into economic and political turmoil. So when these women are appointed to the glass cliff, they are often expected to save the organization, and in many cases, they're looked at as saviors. But the glass cliff phenomenon also exposes another bias, which is the status quo bias, in that most organizations and board members don't see a need to change the current pattern, in this case, that's hiring men, until there's a problem. Finally, something that might help explain the glass cliff phenomenon is that feminine leadership styles, or ones that promote cooperation and listening, are very attractive during a time of crisis. So clearly there needs to be some changes if the United States and other masculine cultures are expected to have more diverse leaders. The biggest organizational change will have to be in culture. All men and women should be trained to understand and welcome different forms of leadership. Ultimately, people should understand that a masculine leader is not necessarily better than a feminine leader. It is just a different kind of leader. Hiring practices also need to change to be more inclusive. One suggestion would be to eliminate names and pictures from resumes and searches for CEOs. So instead, hiring managers can focus just on the qualifications. This might help eliminate gender bias in the early stages of the decision-making process. And finally, the glass cliff has to disappear if women are ever going to successfully lead organizations. Right now, they're being set up to fail. So women need to be appointed to leadership positions during times of stability and not just during times of crisis. In conclusion, I wanted to end my presentation on a quote that I think really gets at the heart of the problem, and that's that Sheryl Sandberg said, "In the future, there will be no female leaders, there will just be leaders." I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation, and thanks for watching.